So, well, I should have done the talk alone, but then I met a friend, Giacomo, and we always talk about these topics, and so it was rightful to do this talk together.
But we are happy people. We talk about this smiling.
We are talking about doom and desolation, but yes, we are happy people, always smiling. So, my Ready for Apocalypse is kind of an aggressive title, but well, you have heard me in the last yesterday and today doing some talks around how things are not great in the internet in general, centralization on medias or centralization of social networks, internet websites, and everything, right? So this is kind of following the same thread, but this talk is about trying to understand together if there was something bad happening, or if the current geopolitical situation that is turning for the worse or is kind of deteriorating in a way, let's say that it would go even farther, right? And God forbid it will, but yet I think that we as technologies or people that anyway like to think about how money and the communication should actually hedge that risk, what we can do to prepare ourselves, or what we can do to prepare our communities to be resilient in case there is something that catastrophic as an apocalypse. Of course, there are many answers, there are many things that can be done, there are many possibilities, but we want to walk through how we came up with this title, with this type of speech, and we want to start with the current status of the world. Let's start from the geopolitical uncertainty. So, for example, you have here are all the US sanctions against China. And above you have China cuts US Treasury holdings in July to 14-year low amid growing uncertainty of the US economy. So you have on one side the US putting pressure on China, China putting pressure on the US.
Luckily Switzerland is not in the slide, but we are at the border with Italy, so it's still dangerous, so we still have to be ready.
So you have, for example, Taiwan has too much geopolitical and tech risk, because Taiwan is the place where all the research on new chips, on new hardware is made. And so they are basically on the border with China, and also they are of great interest from the US. Giacomo, you want to look at some of these?
Yeah, but there is basically all the war. It was a joke about Switzerland, but the point is that literally there is no single place that is safe. During the Cold War, you have the First World and the Second World, and most of the so-called Third War was just a proxy it was involved in a proxy. Right now, any single geopolitical scenario from the Middle East to the Far East to internal struggles that we will discuss later, like in Canada and elsewhere, everything is chaotic. There is no single geopolitical stable equilibrium anymore.
So the same thing can happen and can be relatable when it comes to monetary uncertainty. Then UK grocery price inflation hits record 17%. Then you have what is your plan from Reuters? What is your plan B prepping for a monetary reset?
We may have a suggestion, but we are not going to tell Reuters, right?
And the other one from the CNN Business. The world has a major debt problem. Is a reset coming? And so you see the pattern, right? So these are all doom and gloom headlines. But you see, if it's like we are getting newspapers and media outlets to feed this type of almost preparation for the apocalypse. Again, that's why the title, the aggressive title, Ready for Apocalypse, because you see, like prominent journals are talking about, monetary reset, blockade of transfers between countries, or they are talking about how the inflation is going through the roof. They are talking about again, inflation, money printer go brr, and sorry for my weird R. U.S. debt is raising to 33 trillion. I mean, there is I think a recent data point. The U.S. is printing around 1.5 to 1.9 billion dollars per hour. So by since the beginning of the year, the U.S. printed $2 trillion. And so you see how even the fact that newspapers are talking about it feels like more they are trying to prepare ourselves or make it as normal, right? Yes, a reset will come, but don't worry, right? So.
Yeah, to build on this, it's not that inflation is a new thing or even hyperinflation. Always happened under fiat standards, even traumatic in Africa, even in Europe, like Weimar Republic. So it always happened. But it was never, to this point, normalized into media. 10 years ago, talking about hyperinflation was a conspiracy theory. Even if inflation was happening or still, like when you print money, you put money in real estate or in stock markets, and the price of stocks and buildings will go up. This is just inflation. It's just hidden because it's outside the CPI. Or inflation in other countries where the United States were exporting this inflation was happening, but it was hidden. Now it became clearer. First you had like Jack Dorsey tweeting about that. It was still borderline conspiracy theory, right? It was not really acceptable in the mainstream. Now this discussion is coming to the mainstream, which means that we cannot even pretend anymore. We cannot even hid it under the carpet anymore. So we need to switch from this stuff doesn't exist, from this exists and it's good, trust us.
Data harvesting, we talked this morning about it. So collection of voice data for profit. You have Amazon. FTC complain Alexa illegally collected kids' data. So when you have like Amazon Echo in your house and you speak nicely to him and you ask for you also say thanks to your Echo, Alexa Echo, then all these tools in your house are collecting your information, and big tech companies are profiting out of it. You have Apple fined 8.5 million for illegally collecting iPhone owners' data for ads. And all the possible weird theories are actually reality, right? So WhatsApp has people reading your messages and controlling, what you are writing for your safety, right? It's all about, the way this is pinned by either governments or by the actual tech companies is always a positive spin, right? We are doing it for you. Trust us. This is for the best. We know better than you what you need, right? So that is always the way. This is what they want to instill in us. And I think more and more that we have to think about ways we can protect ourselves and protect our families, because if we are the first ones that are starting to lose the grip on our right to privacy, then everything else will fall apart. Speaking
of data harvesting, there is of course data harvesting for your own good in terms of safety, security, but don't forget that a couple of years ago happened the biggest case of global data harvesting in a medical camp. So healthcare data harvesting that happened all around the world 2 years ago was unprecedented probably in human history.
Data surveillance, similarly, Facebook spied on private messages of Americans who questioned 2020 elections. Also, you have Justice Department investing TikTok owner over possible spying on journalists. You have WeChat in China, most beloved and feared surveillance tool. We know how communication tools, and that's why this morning we presented an explain kit made by Hole Punch. Why we made that is, again, a tool for to to combat against the centralization and the of communication tools, and a way for us to have at least an option, right? Having options and having last resort options is what we should look into.
Another interesting thing here, like here you have a justice department, so a government, which is basically investigating on an app because it is basically surveilling people. But just because this government is a geopolitical enemy of the government that is supporting the app, when that's not the case, in this case China, when that's not the case, you actually have governments that are basically forcing companies to break the privacy of the users. UK is an example. They are passing laws that will force app producers to insert backdoors into the app. So it's not just this evil company undoing stuff and the government is failing to protect us. Government are actively promoting massive surveillance.
Yeah, there is a case of the UK government that was forcing and pushing WhatsApp to reduce the level of cryptography to allow an easier access to people's communications. Then data breaches, of course, the centralization brings us, the data centralization also brings us the exposure of enormous quantities of data, and text messages, images that are extremely private to us, just because they are concentrated in clear text, saved in clear text in data centers owned by big tech companies. These data centers are growing and at the speed and at a size that is becoming almost unmanageable, right? So you have hundreds of thousands of servers. So eventually it will be possible for, these are extremely complex networks, and so protecting the surface of attack of these networks, of these systems, is becoming more and more complex. That's why you have now entire databases on the internet. There is a website called amImpwned.com where you can go and search for your email, for your password that you use you use frequently to check if one of the services that you have been using has been hacked, and so you can understand if in fact someone could enter in one of your email accounts or social accounts using that website. So this is a symptom of what is happening globally, right? More and more data is centralized. So if an hacker targets finds one single vulnerability, instead of have access to data of 15 people, have access to data of 15 million people or even more.
Talking about that website, there are also phishing websites where if you go to check on your passport or user, they will just hack your passport and username. So don't always go to those kind of websites, or be careful. I noticed that very delicate of you. You didn't include Ledger marketing list there. That's I appreciate it.
Deplatforming, another big issue, right? Social media are more and more used as a tool to provide information to others. We are seeing how Twitter is becoming more and more a source of information for many, and there are people that express their ideas, and some governments don't like these ideas, and so there is pressure. I think that there was a recent case with a person deplatformed by many social networks, and I think Rumble, for example, decided to not adhere to that type of pressure. But you see that for these social media platforms, when they have the head of a government writing to them and saying, well, maybe you should cut off this guy because we don't like him, right? What is the right response? You have to either you comply or maybe they ban you. I was told that, for example, in France, you cannot visit a Rumble website because France decided that they didn't like the majority of the content on that platform, and so they decided to shut it down. Is this freedom?
A very important point is that these rules are not predictable and are not transparent, which means that not only you will be deplatformed, but you don't know exactly why or how. So you will go to self-censorship, because the only way that you can be sure that you are not losing your platform is by over-censor yourself, because you don't even know exactly which are the trigger points. Like YouTuber right now will not even communicate with you why exactly you have been cancelled. It just happens. So you have to, it's really Orwellian. You have to be your own judge and jury, and you have to do self-criticism like in Soviet times.
Censorship of information, similar topic. So we have, for example, Amazon cutting off entire websites because just otherwise they would be at risk with their own entire business, right? So governments will always push for censorship. But the problem is also if the political wind changes, then you have also, as Giacomo says, is becoming unpredictable, right? So one time there is, for example, the left wing and they say something. The next time there is a right wing and they say something else. And so you are in this constant, uncertainty that for a business is not great, and is always. So this is happening because, again, of centralization. So if people were able to provide or to broadcast their own information from their own devices, from their own homes, that this issue won't happen, because no one is talking here about not following the laws. Laws exist, but it's important that technology allows freedom of speech and financial freedom, because otherwise we would have to rely on someone else to tell us always what is good, what is right, what we can say, what we cannot say. And the issue, even with that, is that different governments have different parameters. So in certain parts of Asia, you might be able to say in some parts of Asia, they are, for example, blocking some type of speech. And then in Europe, you have people saying, they are bad guys. But also in Europe, they say if you say something, that is against one political party, they are starting to be a bit more aggressive as well. So in a way, it's always easy to look at some other countries saying, thinking that you are more free, but yet more and more we are really seeing between France, UK, and other countries in the Eurozone that we are actually approaching a state of surveillance that is unprecedented. And this is, my opinion, happening because things are really turning for the worst. So that's why the initial title, Ready for Apocalypse, right? If there is geopolitical uncertainty, in a way to maintain power, maintain control over people, is to make sure that they only read and listen to things that you want them to read and listen to.
An important point about law and censorship by law is that everything that you do has been illegal in some jurisdiction at some time. Everything. If you are a woman and you're driving, that's illegal somewhere. If you are reading a Bible, that's illegal somewhere. If you are drinking wine, that's illegal somewhere. So in a global system like the internet communication platform, everything is illegal somewhere. And if you do basically if you try to overlap all the legal restriction, you basically arrive to total censorship, because there are several laws in disagreement, and each one will cover some kind of sensitive topic. And if you just add them, all the censorship up, you will basically remain with nothing. So
censorship of money, similar thing. For example, in Argentina, clamps down on public access to US dollars is something that we know. For a long time, if you live in Argentina, you could only buy $200 of dollars per month through your bank account, because Argentina banks or government don't want people don't want capital to flow outside. But also you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone living in Argentina. You don't want to be in a situation that every 15 years you get a default and you have to start from scratch. So I think that's why technologies like Bitcoin and stable coins like USDT are extremely important and efficient in those areas. For example, you have HSBC froze 1.5 billion of customer cash in dormant accounts. Visa and MasterCard moved to choke WikiLeaks. And so money and communication go at the same pace. You are not really free if you cannot move your money and spend your money in the way you want. You are not really free if you cannot say what you want openly and freely.
That's the most Bitcoinish slide of all, because WikiLeaks was at the very beginning of use case consideration for Bitcoin, and more recently the protesters in Canada, of course, the Freedom Convoy and the Bitcoin donation. So Bitcoin has always been at the very center of this discussion and debate.
Mining centralization is also something that is kind of dear to me because we all remember when China was more than 50% of the hash rate in 2019. That changed because China put a ban on Bitcoin mining, and then most of it moved to that 50% basically moved to US. And the issue there is that, of course, I'm extremely positive in the fact that Bitcoin mining can help the energy grid, can help building renewable energy and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, we should not be in a constant situation where Bitcoin mining is concentrated in a few specific areas. That is problematic for a geopolitical risk, right? So, or for stability of the country, not in the specific case for the US, but we should not get used to it. Centralization in any form you are looking at, almost any form you are looking at it, is wrong and is not sustainable in the long term.
No comment on this yet.
Financial literacy, simply to say that the cost of accessing good education is going through the roof, and also in a way you could argue that the less literate the people will remain, especially in financial terms and financial education, the better it is for controlling them. I remember that until I was 18, I was not aware on how to write a check, right? So we learned so many things in school, but no one tells you, at least in Italy, no one was telling you how you could do like a little bit of accounting. That's kind of crazy.
A very ironic recursiveness here is that inflation will make more expensive to educate yourself about inflation. So it's basically circular.
So how do we build ready for apocalypse? We identified 5 areas: finance, data, network, power, and knowledge. Finance. So gold and Bitcoin. So why both of them? Of course, Bitcoin is the most sophisticated form of money ever created. Is the most unstoppable form of money that humanity ever had, and is in many ways better than gold. Can be transported easily, can be used for payment, you can just remember 24 words, and then you can transport your wealth everywhere you want.
And it's even scarcer than gold. Of course, the typical metric of the stock to flow for Bitcoin is basically infinite.
But it's also true that we, as Tether, discovered that there is not an issue with Bitcoin, but there is a sort of almost a timing issue, in the sense that what if something bad would happen tomorrow, right? Or in the next 5 years? It's true that Bitcoin is understood mostly, for the most part, I'm not talking for the people that are here, but Bitcoin is understood for the most part by younger generations. Today, I was part of the panel. In Europe, between Switzerland and Europe, the type of person that use more Bitcoin or invest more in Bitcoin is 30 years old male. Right, so the age is fairly low, and also the gender is pretty specific. And so that's, first of all, that calls for education. That calls for, we are all about inclusion and making sure that everyone starts to understand the importance, the philosophy behind Bitcoin. And we want all the different age. All the different 360 genders that exist. And we want also the different age. Sorry, we want everyone from all the different age slices to understand Bitcoin as well. So, but we live in this moment, in this reality, and it's also true that gold has been understood by everyone throughout at least 5,000 years of history. And so we know that, I said it this morning, we we know that throughout the history, at least the last 2,000 years, we know that, for example, in the Roman times, Cicero said that with 1 ounce of gold, you could buy a fine vest and a nice pair of sandals. And so today, with 1 ounce of gold, you can buy, that cost around $1,900, you can buy, or 1,900 Swiss francs, you can
Except
buy.
for Joe Nakamoto, that will also have the other price of the gold on top of the dress, of course.
You can buy still a good suit and a good pair of shoes. So it shows how gold maintains its value throughout the history and human history. And now, so this is important because at Tether we understood that. As we understood that, yeah, US dollar is probably the best fiat currency out there. Is the most solid one, but the US dollar is still subject to enormous money printing, inflation. As I said, $2 trillion printed from the beginning of this year. And so we think that gold is something that should be an option put forward to people as a way to protect themselves from, for example, the global reset, right? So you have newspapers talking about the global reset. You have the World Economic Forum talking about the possible reset, and you should start thinking, oh, okay, what if it happens? How am I protected financially? I have Bitcoin, yes, great. If I don't have Bitcoin, you should look at physical gold. If you want something more digital that you can use for payments and so on, we created Tether Gold, right? So we believe that there are different ways to look at gold. I mean, we particularly don't like the gold notes because they are not a real representation of gold. If something is not, if the beauty of gold is that as a piece of metal is scarce, can be held by yourself, and there is the concept that the gold market, the paper gold market is extremely inflated and is governed by futures. And if everyone would redeem through the paper gold market, there will be not enough gold to
fractional reserve.
Yes, exactly.
So gold as a gateway drug to Bitcoin, basically, is the idea. If you want to learn more about this discussion, there is a Twitter space between myself, Paolo, and Adam Beck discussing why this will be different from the 90s e-gold experiment, what has changed, what has not. So if you're interested.
Data. So we discussed about this morning about Keith and the rest. We will talk a little bit about it later again. But we believe in the concept of personal AI. Everyone now is using ChatGPT. Seems like the next cool thing, and everyone is now giving to ChatGPT even more private data than they would do to their best or more preferred social network. And so this is people are writing even more personal stuff to ChatGPT. That is insane. So the way to look at it is that in order to be ready for an apocalypse, right? You still want to have assistance. You want to have access to technology, and the way to do it is that is building AI solutions that are resilient to the centralization of AI that is happening now. Again, there is Anthropic, there is ChatGPT, OpenAI. OpenAI started as a nice
open, right?
Exactly, open, and it was a nice research project, and that they understood they could make a ton of money out of it, and now is kind of not open anymore, and they are making a ton of money out of people's data. And so again, if we want to have full resiliency, if you want to be ready for the apocalypse, you should have your own storage at home, you should back up your own data. Even AI could be personal, could be local to your computer, local to your persona, local to your family, right? There are ways to build technology like this. It's just that there are no incentives from big tech companies to do it.
By the way, if you like this branding about the peers, but you are a woman, there are less symmetric versions available, so you can also buy others.
Network. So peer-to-peer chats and peer-to-peer apps, we talked about it today. The interesting way to think about it is that let's suppose that tomorrow there is a war between, I don't know, Italy and Germany. we would be in a situation where, like, most of the data from Italians is stored on German data centers, because WhatsApp, Zoom, and most of the social networks, they cannot have data centers everywhere. They will pick some locations, and they will put all the data centers to collect all the information from everyone. And so data can be weaponized. That is the scary part, right? Again, ready for apocalypse. The data can be used against the others. And in a war-like scenario, you would have governments that will ask data centers that are on their territory to provide data that can be used against the others. And so again, this is an enormous issue. That's why with Kit, with Whole Bunch, we build technology that allows countries to keep to have communication systems and data storage systems for their own citizens. So with Kit, if all the Italians talking to Italians, the data will remain in Italy, on their devices, on backups that they have at home in Italy, and so on and so forth. But that's a great way to be ready for the worst case scenarios. Is a way you have data is one of the most powerful weapons that the world ever had, because it tells everything about us. Then we have power. Power is, again, energy. Electricity is money, is a currency almost. And so we think that also being sustainable in the way you create the energy for your community, for your city, for your country is extremely important. At Tether, we are trying to invest in sustainable energy research and sustainable energy production, and at the same time, as I said before, Bitcoin mining in order to make it diverse in a geopolitical fashion.
About this, I speak as a hydrocarbon maximalist. Still, if you really want to be independent and sovereign about energy, it's harder to have your own oil extraction facility. It's way easier to just have some wind or solar power. So even beyond discourses about efficiency, there is a discourse about sovereignty and how easy it is to use some energy source to go off the grid, which is a very important consideration.
And also, this is maybe too futuristic, and while it shouldn't, there are discussions about how you can have your own, or eventually the world in 20 years will see personal nuclear batteries, right? So then you can really have cities that can be self-sustainable. But that's a research that is not happening, right? Again, centralization of energy productions is...
Tether uranium will be announced next year, so don't get ahead of yourself.
The last part is knowledge. Is actually something that Giacomo is leading personally, and with us, is the Plan B network that was announced yesterday.
Yeah, basically we try to give a template to education communities and to educators all around the world in order not to reinvent the wheel and to share best practices. We try to make so that even a very complex and decentralized network of teachers can still be seen front-end by the noob as a very consistent, simple and clear path of the rabbit hole inside the knowledge of Bitcoin and other technologies.
And the last one is a shout out. I mean, of course, I'm biased, but is a shout out to Tether, because we think that the way we think about it, right? So I'm here today to talk about these crazy things. I'm here talking about an apocalypse coming, and so I don't want to look like a tinfoil hat, right? I'm full of tinfoil hats, making fun of me on Twitter. But I think that is important to think about these issues. And I am extremely humbled, excited to see a company like Tether really been focusing on these 5 areas of these 5 silos, categories of in a way for business, but also 5 categories for sustainability, for resilience. We believe that communities are made by peers. We believe that communities should be resilient. They should have their own money. They should have unstoppable money that is not following decisions from some random guy that changes every 4 years. We believe that communication should be free for everyone. We believe that should be private. We believe in laws, of course, but we believe that laws should not preempt the right to privacy and to freedom. And we believe that everyone is entitled to sustainable energy, access to sustainable energy, and a fair price for energy. And we believe that especially knowledge is the most important part. Without knowledge, if we were to forget our history, we would, as you know, we always repeat our mistakes because every 3 generations we forget our history. And so knowledge is the key of everything that we are doing. So I just want to say a shout out to Tether for this great job that is doing in focusing on these 5 areas.
Oh, Paolo didn't mention cows, but you know that there are Tether cows around. You have seen them on Twitter, so that's for another topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Round of applause, please, for Giacomo and Paolo. Thank you so much, guys.